Ask a friend if he knows anyone who had access to some tools I needed to finish a project. Guy says sure, he knows a guy from work that would be happy to help. Apparently, he was interested in the same kind of art, but warns me he's a bit off. Drive friend to work one day, he introduces me. Guy seems really distant and withdrawn, shakes my hand, and we chat a bit. He seems real interested in woodwork, the stuff that I was doing, and we talked about sculptures and such for a little while. Things we learned, tools we used, etc. Guy warms up a bit, and I ask him if it would be alright if I check out some of his stuff. He hesitantly agrees, kind of like when you're trying to come up with an excuse, but just can't. He tells me to swing by that night. We can chat over a few beers. Okay, sure. Later that night, I get the call. It's the guy. He sounds a little shaken up. Says things are chaotic at home and right now isn't a good time. He says he'll call me sometime. Whatever, sure, man. 2 weeks go by. Guy calls one afternoon. Says things have settled down and he wants me to bring over some of my works as well to compare and, blah, blah, blah. Sure, dude. So I go to head over and I notice this guy lives in the middle of nowhere. I had to call him up just to find his house. It's at the end of a long driveway. Beautiful acres of land. The driveway is littered with trees, and his house is actually pretty nice. As I come up the driveway, something strikes me odd about the trees I'm passing up. They all have faces carved into them, facing the driveway. Twisted, pained faces. I didn't make much of it. I make morbid stuff myself, and in fact, I was very impressed. The amount of detail was staggering. Looking out onto the tree line of the property, every tree had pained faces looking in on the house, almost like the woods were watching you wherever you were. This actually kind of creeped me out. Looking out was like seeing 100 or so white faces just crying out, kind of like they wanted your attention. Knock on the door. Guy answers with a beer in hand and a much friendlier demeanor than before. Helps me carry some of my stuff in, and he shows me around. Guy seems pretty cool. Begin to notice each room has one of those same damn faces hanging above the door frame. The more I saw them, the more I felt sick. Up close, as the faces were more detailed than I had imagined, almost surrealistic. I asked him what his focus on the faces were for, and the guy kind of tensed up and dodged my question. Upon entering his workshop, which was sweet by the way, he seemed to have other interests besides creepy faces. 7-foot sculptures of women, men, animals, all very well done. And one with a tarp in the back, just chilling there. He says it isn't done yet, so I don't bother. It was right in front of a door that I think led to another room. We began working on stuff together, trading stories and times we had accidentally injured ourselves. Suddenly, subject changes, and the guy asks me, what do I think about God? I tell him I'm not very religious, but I don't rule anything out. Guy starts getting a bit loud, saying that God is a blatant lie. He was told so. By who? He kind of silenced for a moment, and then abruptly asked me if I believe in spirits. I gave him the king of the same answer. It's possible. He starts looking around the room, as if seeing if anyone is around. Then his voice goes soft, and he kind of whispers for a moment. I see things in the woods. At dusk, I can see their shadows. Sometimes they whisper from the trees, and I can hear them. Nope. Obviously, Guy is mentally disturbed. Egg him on. Ask, what do they tell him? They tell him that God is a lie. The only thing after death is darkness. He says they laugh at him and leave dead animals at his tree line. officially creeped out at this point. He said for a while they visited him at night, and each face carved represented a different spirit that had visited him. Says that they can't stand looking at themselves in death, so they don't step within the tree line. That's why he has the entire thing carved out. I'm pretty silent at this point. I hadn't had goosebumps so bad since I was a kid, and chills just running up my spine. He told me that they talked to him from the tree line at night and tried to get him to leave his home. I eagerly tried to change the subject. Guy looks down and just kind of keeps talking. He's pale as a sheet and was obviously genuinely terrified. He even kind of looks like he's welling up. Tells me I'm the only person he's told. Knowing that I'm a stranger, he apologizes. He says he's scared and doesn't know what to do anymore. I try my best to awkwardly console the stranger, and the guy actually kind of starts to break down. I think he needs help, but it's not my place to give it to him. Regrettingly ask him why he's afraid. His face, he says the faces don't work anymore. And 2 weeks ago, he had something terrible in his living room. Huh? He walks over to the tarp sculpture and pulls the tarp off to reveal the most mangled, terrible thing I had ever seen. It hardly resembled a human being. It was terrifying to have imagined this guy seeing it standing in his living room. Shortly after, a loud bang on the wall to my right, I nearly jumped out of my skin. This guy didn't even flinch. Then again, bang. Then it just continued on, continuously, like hail hitting a tin roof. Guy screams, "Stop it," and it ceases. After that, I grabbed my shit, tell the guy I'm sorry, and I got out of there as quickly as possible. As I'm leaving his home and driveway, I look into the rearview mirror, and the tree line is darker than I've ever seen. Age 7, mom left dad for an aging bassist and a really bad hair band. She ends up ODing on heroin a few years later. Whatever. Only child. Dad raises me the best he can. I have no other family except an uncle that my dad refuses to talk to and one grandpa in a nursing home. So around 14, grandpa dies. Dad and uncle both inherit around 2 mil each. Grandpa had a textile company that he sold, if you're wondering how he got rich. Saw uncle around the time because him and dad had to get all the stuff in order with the grandfather situation. He's glad to see me. We talk and catch up a bit. Dad still hates his guts, but he never says why. He just mumbles under his breath as he changes the subject or pretends he needs to go do something around the house. I don't really ask about it anymore, but I did hear that my uncle did good with his money and started buying up land. Fast forward to high school, we find out dad has cancer in his throat. Try to be an optimist, but it doesn't look good. Use up a lot of the money on treatment. I postponed going to college to stay with him so he isn't alone. He ends up dying when I'm 21. I have a little under 10 grand in the house after all is said and done. Work shitty jobs here and there. Get a girlfriend. She cheats on me after 2 years. She lives with me so I can't kick her out right away. Say, what the hell? Take an extended amount of time off from the job and drive off to get away from the situation. I have no one in my life that is close to me now. I feel hopeless and depressed. Drive aimlessly around the country, hit some famous places along the way, Grand Canyon, etc. See a bunch of tourists with their happy families. Get super lonely. Decide I'm going to try to find my uncle. Takes a lot of searching, but eventually I get a number of a guy that keeps an answering machine for my uncle. Apparently, my uncle lives off the grid in a cabin by himself and doesn't even keep a phone or anything. Anyway, I don't want to hang around and wait for a call back. Drive to where he lives. Get to the guy's place who keeps my uncle's answering machine. Old retired guy, pretty friendly. He tells me there isn't a road to my uncle's cabin. There's only a trail through the woods. It's like 10 miles, so the guy lends me an old mountain bike and tells me that I can leave my car at his place. I get my bag with all my essentials and thank him before I head out. Start wondering how Uncle will react to me dropping in on him after so long. Kinda nervous. Past a few small ponds and a couple tiny lakes. I can't believe my uncle owns all this land. Get to the cabin, Uncle is outside and staring at me like a psycho. He seems kind of paranoid. I yell to him and tell him it's me. He lightens up quite a bit. Seems happy to see me. Get the "you've grown so much I didn't recognize you." Get inside and we start catching up and he makes some food. I tell him my situation and he says I can stay with him for a while. It feels good. The next day we just hang out and I see he has a ton of journals that he has been writing in every day since he was 10. My dad had some too, but he quit after a couple of years. Uncle said he can read them, or I can read them, if I don't mind seeing some mildly questionable stuff. I guess he's pretty honest when he wrote. Spend a lot of time reading those journals, learning more about my dad's family. Eventually, I went to get some stuff that my uncle didn't have at his cabin, mainly beer. In the morning, I go back to the car and head to the nearest place for some supplies. This terrible little gas station. Get back and ready to hit the trail again. Old man comes out and I talk to him for a bit. He asks about family history, tell him dad and uncle didn't really get along. He tells me that it might have to do with the lake disappearance. What disappearance? Apparently, a long time ago, this area was a popular camping and canoeing spot. People would pay like a regular campground and carry their canoes in there. Uncle used to live in a different spot and would come here every year when he was younger. Old guy tells me that one year a dude disappeared there, and his tent was all torn up and there was blood everywhere. Only other person on record that was there at the time was my uncle. There was an investigation and everything. My uncle got cleared eventually, and the dude was never found. I asked the dude what he thinks happened, and he says he has no idea, and that I should ask my uncle what happened. This was really unnerving at the time. I figured this is why my dad broke off contact with my uncle. Head back to uncle's with beer and other goodies. Not gonna lie, that information changed the mental image I had of my uncle. Decide not to bring it up right away, but I really want to know what his story is. We drink beer and just hang out outside. I ask him if I can take out the canoe the next day. He says sure, but I can only go in a specific spot. I don't bother asking why. He starts to make something for us to eat. I sit and read more journals. Decide to try to find the journal for the year that the disappearance had happened. Start going through it when I get to a spot that had like 5 pages ripped out, and the way it looked seemed like my uncle had done it recently. All the other journals I had looked through had all of their pages, so I was pretty sure he did this at some point after I took an interest in the journals. I decided not to bring it up. We eat and hang out some more, and I go to sleep. The next day, I want to head out in the canoe and paddle around a bit. He gives me some pointers and tells me to stay only on this one lake. Okay, sure, no problem. I paddle around for a while, hugging the shore mostly. Kinda scared to go into deeper water. Eventually lose sight of the cabin. It's a nice day, lots of wildlife. I see an odd looking area offshore. There are a bunch of chopped down trees and it's really overgrown, but it looked like something used to be there. I decide to check it out and find out that it's an old, overgrown trail. It also looks like someone tried to cover it up with logs and debris to hide it. I'm too curious to leave it alone. I get out and walk through the thick vegetation, follow what is left of the trail for about a quarter mile. come out to a different lake. It is dead quiet. No wind, no animal sounds, no bugs. Get a super weird feeling like someone is watching me. Start walking out on the rocky shore. Realize that it's way too quiet here. Even the water seemed to be too still. Decide to go back to the canoe and head back to the cabin. Uncle is out and waves to me. Asks how it was. I tell him it was fun. Ask him about the other lake. His face goes blank as he looks off in that direction. He says he told me not to go to any other lakes. I tell him I just walked there. I didn't take the canoe over. He tells me never to go there again, or I would have to leave. He tells me that he doesn't want me going in the canoe again. He seems pissed. Whatever. He disappears for a while, and I decide to get more beer. I get back to the cabin, and Uncle still isn't there. I decide to hold off on the beer and make something to eat. My uncle gets back, and he's pretty quiet, and things are kind of tense. I just end up sitting around till bedtime. The next day, my uncle's in a better mood, apologizes for being a dick. We start drinking beer, and he goes through most of them and loosens up a lot. I guess he really needed to take the edge off. I ask him why Dad and him never got along. He just kind of brushes it off. I ask him if it's to do with the incident on the lake. He gets quiet for a moment and asks me, what do I know about it? I tell him what the old guy told me. He gets quiet for a really long time and just stares off in the direction of the lake with the overgrown trail. Maybe it was because he was drunk, or maybe it was because he was tired of keeping it to himself, but he told me he had hid the missing journal pages. He told me to make of it what I wanted, but what he wrote, was the truth. He got up and went for a walk. I went to the spot in the cabin where he hid the pages and started reading them. First page is from the day before his trip out. It didn't really have anything too interesting on it. Mostly a list of all the stuff he took on his camping trip and what he ate and the weather, which he documented every day. The next 2 pages were from the same day. They were about him arriving at the park and hoping he was the first person there that season so he could camp wherever he wanted. He found out that there was already another guy out on the lakes who went out the night before. I guess back then the land was a campground and it was a lot easier to access some of the areas. So it didn't take long to get to the lakes with his canoe. He had a specific lake that he liked to stay at, and he was hoping to have it all to himself, or at least his favorite spot, which was a small island in the lake. When he got onto that lake, he saw smoke on the island and a red tent, so he was disappointed that his spot was taken. Eventually, he settled onto a small peninsula that had some trees on it. The only other noteworthy thing from that day was that he never saw the guy walking around on the island, and eventually the smoke stopped. The last thing on that page was that my uncle planned on moving to a different lake the next day because he wanted to be completely alone. The next day, he noticed that the guy hadn't lit a fire, and he still hadn't seen him walking around on the island, and his canoe was still there. There was a storm rolling in that day, and my uncle decided to stay at that spot for another night. He also wrote that during the night on his first day, he got up to take a piss. The moon wasn't quite full, but it gave off a lot of light. He saw what looked like a log standing straight up in the middle of the lake. The last page had 2 days on it, one on the front and on the back. The weather was horrible the next day, windy, cloudy. He decided to try and head out anyway, but ended up flipping his canoe and had to get back to shore. He made a fire and dried out all his gear and clothes the best he could. He set up his tent again and was in for another night. He also wrote that he still had not seen any movement or a fire on the island, and that the night before he once again saw the upright log on the lake. But this time, it had been closer, about half of the way between the first place he saw it and his campsite. He also noted that it was not visible during the day. From what I had read up to that point, I didn't understand what was so bad about this that he would try and hide it from me. That all changed when I read the last entry. The night that he was there, the moonlight woke him up. He also had to take a piss. He got out of the tent in the cool night air to complete silence. The only sound was the faintest lapping of the water on the shore. As he was relieving himself, he noticed how calm and glassy the lake was. And then he saw it. The thing that he thought was a log stood at the very end of the peninsula. Now that it was on land, he could tell that it was alive. A pitch black figure, almost 7 feet tall, wearing what looked like wet clothes or robes. He crawled back into his tent. His heart was racing and pretended like it wasn't there. Then he heard the voice of a child in distress. "Can you help me? I'm lost." Followed by low giggling and random whispers from around the tent. "Shh, don't wake him up." Then more giggling. This went on for what seemed like an eternity. The sounds of footsteps all around the tent, giggling and shushing. Just before dawn, he heard what he presumed to be the figure wading back out into the water. As soon as it was light out, he was already packing his things and heading back the way he came in. But first he paddled up to the island to see if there was anyone there. All he saw were the remains of the first fire, the tent torn apart on one side, and blood everywhere, and strange symbols drawn on a boulder. He reported the missing man, but he never told anyone about what he saw that night. After I was done reading that, I just sat there until my uncle got back from his walk. "It's still out there," he said, as he looked towards the lake.